Hey now, and welcome to episode 41 of the Help Find the Others podcast. If you've been here all along, well, welcome back. But if this is your first time hearing us, well, welcome. I'm your host, Ruben, and my co-host, Stan, is on the line too. How you doing, buddy?
Doing great.
So, yeah, this was another episode of revisiting a past guest, and this is Rich. And so last time, I mean, he has a great backstory. So if you haven't heard that episode, I think, what was he, our second guest?
He was really early on. Really early on.
Yeah. I should have looked up what episode number, but definitely before listening to this one, if you haven't heard his first appearance, go and listen to that, because he has an amazing backstory and it's very inspirational to me, and just, you know, how he's come to view the world the way he does. But this episode was really good because we got to go a little deeper philosophically. I guess would that be a good way to put it?
Yeah, I'd say, yeah. Deeper philosophically, deeper in every way that you could get, mentally about the inner workings of the world that we live in. It was really cool. It was like a preface to, what is going to be his book when the time comes. So it was cool to just pick his brain, and just, he always takes a deeper route to thinking. So it was cool to get that perspective to it all.
Yeah. So this is just a forewarning. This is a really heavy discussion, and you might need to rewind some spots to be like, what were they saying there? But I think it'll be very approachable. And so, yeah, without further ado, here's Dr. Richard Waterloo. Yeah, so Dr. Richard Waterloo, thank you for coming back on and talking to us again. I also wanted to thank you, as you've kind of been the de facto mayor of our Discord-ville, online. And, I really wanted to thank you for your participation in that and the discussions that you keep going.
Yeah, it's a good community.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I think, like, especially on some of the deeper content or, conversations, you really spark some really good talks between people, and, keep it from just turning into, posting cat videos from YouTube and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've been diving into the deep waters for the last couple of years. And so the things that I bring back are fun, and they're really cool conversation starters in the deep end there.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I know we talked a lot about, some other things in your last episode, but since then, you've been writing a book and have a book proposal ready. And so, why don't you just kind of brush over, what your book's about, and then we can just kind of dive deeper into it.
Okay. The book is a tour guide through the simulation. So I'm taking the simulation argument, and I'm walking a reader through how everything is a simulation in the first third of the book. So I go through your senses and how you receive information from reality. And then I go into the mind and how the mind works and how it works kind of like a computer. And then I go into the physical reality and talk about how it's hard to measure anything. So once we get down to the quantum level, it's just, we're kind of making stuff up at that point. And then I talk about beliefs. And so if you're in a simulation, what's going on within the simulation in the way of like programming, and how you're getting information, and the way your perception, the way you view reality, and all of the ideas that you have about it, the beliefs about it, how those are kind of programmed into you by your parents, by society, by yourself, by just all the stimulus. And then if we have that fact, then we can play with, you can metaprogram. That's kind of John Lilly and Timothy Leary's topic of expertise, where I take from their ideas that you can program your biocomputer, your body and your mind to have a certain perception of reality. And so after that, I get into how to look at reality in the way of games. So if you are going to program your reality, I give the reader a suggestion on how to play within the simulation. And that's through like game theory. And I draw from James Carson's Finite and Infinite Games, which is a wonderful book. And changing your perception in that way. And then from there, I create a player called the Master Player, which kind of has a good grounding of reality, but is still open to new things. And then I bid the reader farewell at the end. So that's kind of the short pitch of the book so far.
Yeah, I mean that's that's a lot of stuff. So kind of like a dumb, if we could give a dumbed down idea of simulation theory, you know, do you expand on like what created the simulation? Like, cause you know, I've heard different things of like aliens and stuff like that, but like, if it is if reality is a computer simulation, like, do you believe, or do most people that believe in simulation theory think that it's like artificial intelligence took over, kind of like the Matrix, or, you know, do you go into that in the book, or, you know, what are your beliefs on that?
Well, I'm kind of stuck where Robert Anton Wilson got stuck in his Chapel Perilous, where we can't experience anything outside of our current system, our tool of experiencing reality, our skin and bones, and then in our flesh, all of our nervous system, right? And then our way of thinking about it. So anything beyond what we can measure is metaphysical. It's thought-based, right? So the origin of a simulation, I don't know, I don't know much about much. But what's cool about using the simulation is it provides a good way to expand upon some of the ideas about reality and create a more critical thinking person. So if you were to look at the simulation and open it up to the question of what came before the simulation, kind of like what came before God or the Big Bang, then you're playing in imaginative territory, which I think is one of the big purposes of the book, is to consider all of this information and all the information that you receive in your life, and then think about it critically. Do I actually believe in this stuff? Whether it be the simulation theory or your own identity and all these different beliefs that we have. So what's beyond anything, I don't know, but it's fun to think about it. And I think we should, if we're going to move on from kind of a logical way of thought, if we're getting into quantum theory and stuff like that in the future.
Yeah, I guess that's, you know, I guess that's the thing with understanding simulation theory, is not to break out of it. I'm sorry, I'm going to use a lot of Matrix like things, because that's like, since I've heard of simulation theory, that's like how I relate it is to the movie The Matrix. But, you know, the goal isn't to break out and fight the machines or whatever. Like, is it to just understand how to understand and be aware of the simulation, and then be able to use that to optimize your experience in it? Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, very much so. Where you have, I often feel, because I play with simulation theory and all these different metaphysical concepts, I kind of get stuck between, I'm not sure what real is and what fake is. And now it's even more potent. And if you watch, pay attention to politics or the news, we don't know what's real and what's fake. So we're kind of at a weird place where the experience that I have frequently is, I'm not sure if that's real or it's fake, but it doesn't really matter. I'm kind of stuck, right? Whether I'm in a reality or in a simulation, I'm stuck here. And there's one way out, and I'm trying to not go down that route of leaving too soon or under my own hand. But okay, so we're here, we're stuck here. Now what? What can we do? Right? And then you can play around with all different ways of believing and thinking and creating that kind of gets you in a direction, or at least on a comfortable path that is good enough for you or real enough for you. If you need grounding.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. Like, I think the other analogy I've heard for, kind of at least this dimension of reality is, it's like the video game The Sims, and that like you're like a character and you have like a loop, of things that you do, right? And we all like fall into habits very easily, and that would make sense that it's like a program that's in us. And but if you're aware of that program, that's how you change that program, and that's why, that's another thing I really like about our Discord server and the conversations we have on there is, it's people, we were all drawn together because of talking about psychedelic drugs, but it's like, now it's like 50% trying to better our habits and get better habits and change that loop, change that program, whether we're all talking about it as a simulation or not, like it seems to all fall into that. We're all trying to like be aware of that, regardless of like what caused it, what, if it is a simulation, if it's just human nature and psychology or whatever, but we're all like trying to improve that loop that we can fall into so easy.
Yeah, on your The Sims, it's a great. I've been playing with a section that's going to go in one of the chapters where I take the thought experiment. If you were in a sim, like if you were Sims in the game The Sims, what would you do to test your reality, right? So you would say, this house is 40 cubits by 40 cubits. Excellent. And then I say, all right, well, what's beneath a cubit? And you look in there and you find that there's really nothing. And, well, that's kind of what we're finding on this end, right, in this reality. So you could play with it that way, of if you were a sim, what kind of tests would you run? Now, unfortunately, the simulations that we make, the computer simulations that we make, are emergent from our current known ideas, right? So that's kind of a paradox as well. But it gives us a way to think about our reality. And I think one of the big topics that I want to get across is that you're inside of it, right? There's a perception, especially with psychedelics, where it's called the noetic experience, where it's beyond any language you can put on it. So it's my favorite part of the mushroom experience, where you're just there. There's nothing you can do to describe it, and you're just part of a moment. And if we can find a way to more closely be within those types of experiences, then we can, if we want to, create our new reality out of that, right? Or new perceptions. But by thinking about things in the way of simulation, it kind of puts you in the moment just talking about it, because then you look around and you're in your moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, it's something I try to like instill in my kids and my wife and everything. Like it's like some of the most stressful, frustrating parts of reality are when you're ignoring the moment, and it's like, it's so hard to be, you can get bored with trying to just, meditate or just, do things that have you in the moment. But it's hard to get like stressed out or frustrated, like you've never heard anyone be like, that was the most fucking stressful meditation I've ever had, like, I mean, well, I guess you could, if you're letting your thoughts take control of you, but for the most part, if you're in the moment, like it's just not frustrating or stressful. And there's so much of our natural program of whatever the simulation is or whatever, that just keeps us out of the moment. It's always trying to pull us away from it and just keep us rolling down the train of what everything else is doing. And it's those moments you step off that train and just like, oh yeah, look at this tree, look at this, whatever. And if it is a game of Sims or whatever, and we were a character in there, like, yeah, that's what it is. You're just looking at the scenery or whatever, but it's like that's where you notice that, your surroundings and stuff like that. Like most of life is just taking us away from noticing and being aware.
Yeah, and the more information that you have, especially information with meaning, like a moral meaning or something like that, the more information you have, the harder it is to be within the moment, because your mind's going 1,000 miles a minute, trying to decipher, is this good? Especially moral judgment sort of thing. Or am I right in the right space? Did I say the right thing? All these different self-doubts. And those are also what I consider simulations as well, abstractions from information that we apply meaning to.
Yeah, it's part of the story, but it doesn't.
So if you have all this information and you're also being told you're right, or you believe you're right and other people are wrong, then you're just so filled with thoughts about things that you can't be here. And so that's why I think psychedelics are very important tools that you can use, along with meditation and stuff like that, that bring you to the moment, especially like that, like 3-gram mushroom dose or the 2-tab LSD, where you're just in and of the moment, and all of the thoughts are gone. Then you realize that there's a way of being that I believe is accessible outside of LSD, mushrooms, and DMT. But it's there. There's something there, and if you can get near it, that might be close enough. It's just like in waking life, to just, I don't know what's going on, just like complete agnosticism about everything, the nature of reality, and have just kind of enjoy and live in an existential experience or crisis. But if you can be part of the moment briefly, then and I think that's one of the big points. You can be here.
Yeah. And I totally agree with what you said, that mushrooms and LSD and psychedelics aren't needed to do that. There's obviously lots of people that have found other paths, and I think we said it a couple podcasts ago, and I can't remember who it was. Oh, I was quoting James Fadiman, but it's like the goal of the psychonaut is to need less and less of that tool every time. But that's the thing, is like, you're right. It's the whole be here now kind of mentality. And obviously a lot of people bought into that idea through psychedelics, but there's a lot of people that can be here now with other means, with other tools, with other paths. And I think that's a really important thing that, I try to get across with talking about psychedelics. Like, psychedelics interest me from like a, brain chemistry, maybe like plant evolution angle of like how it does that to our brain. But as far as the message in it, and how it would relate to reality, like meditation and yoga and floating and breath work and all these other things, like they interest me just as much, because of like getting to that, the way to be in the moment.
What have you, while you've been writing this, what has been the like most interesting topic, do you think, on the, I guess, macro scale of simulation theory?
Sure. Language and belief. So the way we believe and the process of believing. So there, just like in psychology, where we have these methods and these theories about how we process emotions and process all this information, beliefs transform the way we perceive reality, right? So I'll just go off on beliefs. If all the information you bring into your system, right? I'm starting with the fundamental idea that you are an information processing machine, right? So right now you're in your moment, you're being exposed to information, and then it comes in and you process it in your mind, and then you take that information, you do what you wish with it, right? So some of this information comes in and we just believe it. So there's a system of believing where we kind of take things we take information in and we believe it is real if we believe the person telling us is credible, but not the information. So there are a lot of things we don't know, but we believe. So I believe in gravity, but I really couldn't explain it to you. And I believe in Rich, the guy that I believe I am, but I couldn't explain it to you. We can't explain each other's experience. So we're all working with all these different beliefs. And in the book, I've narrowed it down to 3 different types of beliefs, where you have necessary beliefs. So these are beliefs that you would have that you wouldn't really want to mess with. So I'm not going to play with the idea that I can fly. I'm not going to believe that I can fly, because then if I tried and I failed, then I wouldn't be able to believe anything anymore. I wouldn't be able to exist, right? So those are necessary beliefs. And then just believing in reality in general, believing that the table is wood and it is there. And then you have narrative beliefs. And these are beliefs that you bring in about yourself. So when your parents told you you're a good person or a bad person, or any of the things that they gave to you, you took in, and all your friends, all the beliefs that they gave you by giving you compliments or insults, and then the things that you believe about yourself as well. So it creates a character, right? So I'm still sticking with the idea that you're inside of a simulation and you're a character within a simulation. So these are narrative beliefs. And then on top of that, if this is a scale from left to right, necessary, narrative, and then the third one would be recreational. And so these are beliefs that you have maybe for a brief little bit, like, oh, today sucks. And then later, because you believe that in the morning, you said, today sucks. And later today's a good day. You turned it around, right? So those are 2 different beliefs. And one was temporary. Well, actually both were temporary, but let's go with that first one, where you believe that today sucked. You only believed it, right? And so you can and then another type of recreational belief would be Santa Claus. Or if you did believe in God and then you don't, or you don't and then you did. You can find within this model that there's a little bit of malleability. You can work with your beliefs a little bit and kind of pick and choose, especially on the recreational ones. So one thing I did playing with recreational beliefs is I took the belief that I have 2 coffee cups, or 2 cups, right? And one was bright and orange, so I made that my morning cup. And then the other one was brown and it had a duck on it. And so that was my evening tea cup. So I trained myself. And when I picked up the coffee cup, I thought, orange, it's bright and sunny. I gave it reasons, right? All of our beliefs have reasons attached to them. You believe you're Stan and you believe you're Ruben based on a bunch of beliefs. So this cup, to me, I had the ideas and the purposeful thoughts to make this thing bright and shiny and make me feel a little bit more chipper. And over time, it did that. And then my brown cup, I had beliefs that were calming, relaxing, and kind of got me in the mood to go to sleep. And so then I believed that. And so I watched this process unfold over the course of about a month or so of believing. It's kind of playing with beliefs. And so if you can play with beliefs in that way, then you can kind of play in the beliefs of the ideas that you have about yourself, right? Where, okay, and I do this in the tank, or I did this in the tank, not too much anymore, but where I would go in and think about my personality, and I kind of lay it out in a big grid in my mind. And then, okay, what does Rich do that I think we can kind of get rid of? And so what I would take a belief, I bite my nails, and I would take the belief that I should stop biting my nails. Okay, well, but then why? And so I would attach a few beliefs, and this is kind of at a deeper level in the float tank. But the principle is still there, where you can take your beliefs and work with them a little bit. And by doing that, you kind of open yourself up to dissolving your identity, or dissolving what you believe is real, and then reconstructing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and again, I think you mentioned before that, part of the simulation is language and everything, but like, there's a lot of different terminology that exists in that play with adjusting your beliefs. One thing, like I always talk about gratitude. Well, what is that other than like, changing your belief of like, wow, I have all this good stuff, because we can so often fall into where we have our belief is like everything's, I have bad luck, everything bad happens to me, like everyone else has all the luck, whatever, like you have all these beliefs that alter your reality, like if you physically make a uh dedicate yourself to being grateful every day and making gratitude postings, or writing in a journal and all of those things, well, you're altering your belief. I bet if you kept a journal and every morning you woke up and wrote about how shitty your life was, like your life would probably get shittier, just like people see the opposite of getting up in the morning and writing about gratitude and things that are good and whatever. And so, there's also like, I think people use the term prayers, like say your prayers before bed. Like that's kind of doing the same thing. You're altering your beliefs, you're being grateful, and these are all, I attributed them to just kind of like universal energies and laws, but I could see that being part of a simulation program of like, you can kind of, choose your own adventure like game or something like that, and, uh, it's all, I think what I started that train of thought there was that it's like, it's all the same stuff. It's just like, you can attribute different labels to it. And even that is changing your belief, like if you believe altering your view on things is the result of praying and praying to a god, like that's the program you're going to write to yourself, is like this religious program that you're going to follow or whatever, um well, I guess I don't know where I was going with that train of thought there, but I I definitely agree that you can. I think you said they're recreational beliefs, but like at least by altering the recreational beliefs, you can like kind of change the short term experience you're having in the simulation. I guess is my thinking correct there?
Yeah, especially language. If kind of one of the realities that we believe in is these truths from words, right? Because if I have an experience, kind of going back to collecting my own information, right? I have a completely different experience than you because you've received different types of information. And so when we talk, let's hop on to language. So when we talk, we're sharing the idea of a knowable idea about our experience through language. This is the idea of one of the ideas of Wittgenstein, where there's a reality outside of language, like the noetic experience we were talking about, and we can only share with each other the through language, right? So that's the method by which we share information. And if we share information with ourselves, then language is the tool as well, or one of the tools. So if we craft our words to have a deeper meaning or a different meaning, then we're crafting a different type of reality that we're talking about.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that's what I was getting at when I started talking about like religion, is like if you would apply religious language to things that everyone kind of notices and puts their own words to, it kind of writes the rest of the script. Like for instance, I kind of believe that what we call angels, ghosts, aliens, entities, like all of these terms are all the kind of the same thing that people notice about reality, and they, partly because of the language of whatever program they're in, they might be like, oh, I saw an angel, or I saw a ghost, I saw an alien, like, but it's all kind of the same thing. But the rest of the belief structure and lifestyle and everything else of the different people that would use the different terminologies for those things is completely different. I think that's what I was getting at, is that like, it's like you can follow a religious program, programmed pathway because of the language you use, or you could follow a UFO hunter lifestyle path based on the language profile you use for the same things that we're observing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So if you use, let's say you're a Bigfoot hunter or you've had a UFO experience. So, I've crossed over, I've done a DMT trip, and just once where I broke through, and that was more real than real, and I met these entities, right? But how can I come back from that and then look at and then talk to somebody who had a Bigfoot experience or an angel miracle or something like that, and then say you didn't have that experience? So I can't really say that. So then you ask, well, then what is that? And I like that idea that we're all having a different type of experience. And I think this entire thing is a hallucination, whether you call it a simulation or metaphysical miraculous reality. But if they're having an experience where something anomalous has happened, well, then we can't really doubt it, because I'm not going to call them a liar. All these people liars with alien experiences. So is it something metaphysical, kind of like what you were positing, and kind of what Jack Valet and Diana Pasulka, she wrote a great book called American Cosmic about looking into these different, she's a Catholic researcher and looking into Catholic miracles. And then she got into aliens, and she said kind of the same thing, where they're all having a type of experience. So what is that? And how can we use that within our philosophies and our metaphysical sciences to kind of explain what's going on?
Yeah.
And so if you read a lot about religious stuff and you have an anomalous experience, you're more likely to see the things that you're programmed to see. And synchronicities too. That I've had so many weird, odd synchronicities that I didn't believe at first. I'm coming from a very atheist background, and coming into this, you play with these odd beliefs, and then you start having weird experiences. But then, how am I having those experiences? With synchronicities, and more than just like precognition as well. Like knowing something is going to happen, then it happens, and then you start questioning what's going on. And so there's anomalous happenings. I don't think we should, as materialist scientists and stuff like that, or just people who are curious explorers, as I like to call them, people who are interested in what's going on. Let's not throw that out. Let's explore it. Even if we can't find an answer for it, especially a logical answer, well, we have an idea, right? And so from our ideas now, our sciences of the future will come from them, right?
Yeah, that's the thing that on this whole, kind of journey I've been on in the 2 years of starting a YouTube channel and building a psychedelic community or whatever. That's been one of the biggest things for me, is like, I have from, my years of going to college and working in a, sciencey field. That's what my programming and all of my, like, I seek logic through science, just kind of inherently, because of that. But then the last 2 years, I've really realized like how science only takes us to a point, and then if there isn't a way to duplicate results or have the results peer reviewed, or there isn't an instrument that can measure data about the what people observe about reality and stuff like that, then it like just stops. Like science is just like, oh, okay, well, that's all there is. It's just the physical, like you said, material way of looking at it. And if psychedelics has taught me one thing, it's like consciousness and reality goes a step beyond at least what we have observed in the material world to now, like in the future, like you said, like it's almost like psychedelics are the tool that science needs to expand into quantum computing, or because I mean the whole idea behind quantum physics and everything is psychedelic as fuck, and it's like every quantum physicist should be, if they're not already, be using psychedelics as a tool to explore and kind of help that field go. Like I also think the sciencey ideas of playing with like time travel or just deep space travel, stuff like that. Like I think a lot of the roadblocks we have that are stopped by the pure materialism of the science that is developing those in those areas, like psychedelics is the bridge, the tool that like kind of maybe can push that farther down the road, and humanity can like push that out there and like get over the roadblocks that we think we're like physically limited by. So that's been one thing, is like I've kind of had to expand my, I guess my my language profile that I use to describe observations in life, to not just be science based and to be more metaphysical, to listen to people who are Bigfoot hunters and believe in ascension and all these things, because like I think they're observing the same things. It's just they don't have the science language profile to describe it. So it seems different, but it's the same observations, I guess.
Yeah, and if you look at our language, the word is, right? So we have Ruben is on a podcast, right? So we're saying what reality is, right? We're defining it using that word, or any word to be. So there's a way of speaking called E prime, where you delete all of the verbs to be, and then you describe reality how you think it is. So this is a trick of Robert Anton Wilson, where instead of saying I am in a room, you could make it more precise by saying I believe I am in a room right now, right? And so you don't want to walk around talking like that, because it throws people off. However, but by thinking outside of the language of is, which is a very problematic word, then you start to realize that you don't know what is. And so what that means is the way we describe things, even our sciences and our realities, anytime we use our language, we're stripping the paint off, right? Or we're putting another layer of paint on and then calling it that. Right? So when I say reality is a simulation, it's a paradox. It's a false statement, because by putting it into that box, then you are limiting it by definition, right? And so by opening up your language, here's a good example. We have a person is either male or female. Well, now we're having an issue with language where things are more than just one or the other. It's not binary, right? You're either in Rome or you're not in Rome. Well, if my avatar is being viewed in Rome, but I'm in Kentucky, which is true, And so with the gender issue, we have a bunch of different identities being created, believed identities. They're being created challenging our idea of what things are, what gender is. And so if we're going to go forward and think about reality, then we need to work with our language. And string theorists use math and string theory to say that it's more than just language, but that's still within their language. And a lot of these codes that we work with outside of quantum physics, like the materialist codes of the English language and math, really define what things are, when really we don't know what things are. So the language we use creates a whole new reality, and you can see it. You can see it very prominently in the news that we consume, where things are defined and then later they're redefined, or things aren't what they say they are, or they're limited in their scope of reality, and all these different things. So we're at a point now where we can witness kind of our reality that's dissolving just in our language.
What do you think comes first then, the language or the belief? Language?
Yeah. So the model that I'm using is there's information. So back to the simulation theory. Mm-hmm. There's information, and that's all there is the information. Or you could say God, right? But there's only information. Our bodies experience reality, so we absorb the information of touch and sound, taste, and sight, and we take that information in, and then in the noetic experience, that would be the noetic experience, the second level, or the first abstraction. And then the abstraction after that, we apply language to it. And then we just start defining what things are or what they aren't. And then from there, we create a narrative or a context of things. And then we start believing things. So yeah, that's a good question, though. So what do you think? What do you think, Stan?
I mean, what I don't know, because in a lot of situations it could go either way almost. Like when you brought up the gender situation, a lot of that is belief, and now we're trying to find the language to deal with it, and to describe it. So it's a toss up, I think. But I mean, like, for example, a thing that I was thinking about is, if you are under the assumption that this is a simulation, then what is a like mental illness, whether it be anxiety, nothing extreme, but anxiety, mild depression, something like that? What is that? Is that just a narrative that we're telling ourselves to believe, or how do you define that?
I like to think of it as a narrative, but the beliefs are things that are like, so with general systems, things that are incongruent with the current system, things that don't really mesh with the things that are going on. So I think a lot of the problems that we're having, outside the physiological problems, which are also mental problems, but we have, the beliefs that we have are not working within the system that we have, whatever it may be, right? It could be our belief system, it could be our social system. So we could take the idea of depression, something that I have, and that I've been diagnosed with anyway. But it's when you have beliefs about reality that don't mesh with what other people are saying, right? Then you don't get to have that connection, and you don't get to express yourself in the way that you think you can and should. And that creates a disturbance within the system, the personal system and the belief system,
Yeah.
So that's why I think once you have a good grounding in psychedelic thought and just psychedelic thinking, then you can kind of understand that what is going on out there, all the opinions that you're supposed to have, all the beliefs and the behaviors that you should have are abstractions just like yours, but they're abstractions that you can set aside because you're living inside your own personal reality tunnel. And then you can kind of ground yourself within your own belief system, as opposed to living in a belief system where you're being told that they're wrong. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And actually that makes me think of a Terence McKenna's talk where he was saying that everybody's schizophrenic. I think it's Terence McKenna. Everybody's schizophrenic. It's just, what do you want to be crazy about? Do you want to be crazy and believe the mainstream, or do you want to be crazy and do your own, find your own way?
Yeah, we all have these weird beliefs. I mean, the belief that just take America, whatever America is, and the power structures. All these things are believed, and they're not questioned at all, which is understandable. It keeps the people who have the power maintaining the power. So once you see them as options or beliefs that you can pick up, I could believe in the state as a real authority figure. The authority comes from the Lady of the Lake or our founding fathers or something romantic like that. It sounds more like a religion when you pick it apart. So you can believe in that if you like, but it's not really there. But we all kind of agree on this belief. We, not including me.
I think that, I mean, I definitely agree that politics is a religion, and now we've even expanded into like political parties are religion, but it's kind of, I don't like what's going on in like, just to bring the conversation down to a small level, like in our government. But I do feel that with how fucked up it is and how weird, like, all the political things that happen in the United States government are so weird. You start hearing people more and more say like, I can't believe that's happening. So if you expand that out, it's like the more that people keep saying like, I can't believe our government is doing this, like the more we're not going to believe in it. And the more like, we might move towards a different simulation that isn't so controlled by governments, because nobody believes in the program that has been. And so like, there's so many people that like may not like our current president, but aren't really upset and kind of see that it's important for like the whole system to break down so that people stop believing in it, and we can produce a new program going forward that, is more interesting and not as a reality TV kind of.
Yeah, if we have the belief that, well, it's always been this way and it'll always be this way, or even the belief that it's been this way and we've gotten over it and the state survived. I'm assuming that the empire will collapse, but then again, I only talk about realities that I want to see happen. So if people believe that the state won't collapse and will continue and we'll just get over it, sort of thing, then we're kind of limiting what may be possible. And so by thinking outside of a state the way it currently is, then we can work with bigger truths and more concrete truths than because the government told me it's okay, or because the government told me not to do it. As the state being the sole authority of morality. And I think we've been breaking that down as a group for 50 years or so, with civil rights, with gay inclusion, and now with decentralized information, news coming from all these different sources. We're becoming more inclusive, and the state is inherently exclusive. So we have to think about what might happen. And if it does collapse, I hope it's a peaceful collapse and everybody just goes, it's all right, I'm good. We found this Bitcoin over here and we're just going to do that. And we found some people to represent our security causes, our security interests. So we'll do that. And we don't have, that's way big picture. But just having the idea of it being okay for things to fail so that the butterfly can emerge from the caterpillar, then let's play with it and let's kind of agree on some truths going forward so that we can have a reality that works for everybody.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Most, not everybody.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's interesting too, because like, it definitely, like, I think we've had a few discussions in other podcasts about the struggle or the arguments between the age groups, the demographics, cohorts or generations, whatever you want to call it. It's like, it seems like as we progress through whatever the hell's going on, there's an evolution of belief, right? That like, every generation is more and more open to the idea that beliefs can change and that it's fluid and stuff like that. And it's like the older generations have been more stuck in their ways. And like, that seems to be a universal constant as well. Like, I'm pretty fucking open-minded, but the generation after me is going to be even more so, and I'm going to look like a cranky old man, even though, you know, I believe in some pretty out there stuff and don't really have firm beliefs. They're stronger than they seem to me, you know, and definitely to younger generations. And like, that's interesting to see happen. As I see, you know, my children like forming beliefs, you know, like I seem way more get off my lawn than I think, I guess is what I'm saying, you know, that like, it's interesting to just kind of like observe that. And, you know, I don't know if that's, well, it's either a universal constant that it's always evolving, or it's a universal constant that as you age, you become more, you know, more stuck in your ways, like you're more stuck in your programming or whatever.
I think the longer that you're in a belief system, and you notice with this with the elderly, the longer you're in a belief system, the more you believe it, right? Especially when you're not told that you don't get to choose your beliefs. So if you're in a belief system, and I noticed this with simulation theory. So I started out not believing in simulation theory, but kind of taking it on as a goof of like, I'll just put all these cool ideas and represent reality in a tour guide of the simulation. But then I start digging into it, and now I don't know. Okay, belief's a tough one for me, but I have a better understanding of how this works, and I kind of believe it, right? So, and I think and I've only been in this for 2 years and just kind of a baby into it, but if I were to spend another 30, 40 years into it, like some other people have in their belief systems, they would find more evidence to prove their case, and I would find more evidence to prove my case, right? So so back to what you were saying about the youth having this idea that you can pick your own, just like you can pick your own friends on Facebook and the people that you follow on Twitter, you kind of are getting a sense that people are wanting to choose their own perceptions of reality or the information that they bring in. People, I don't pay attention to politics because, and then they'll have an answer, but they're choosing what information to take in. And so if you only choose to take in Catholic information, then you're only going to have Catholic thoughts. And which, when you have your own thoughts and you believe your own thoughts, then you're kind of in a cyclical loop of growing belief. And so if that's what happens, and that's part of the process, and we don't get out of it, and as you're experiencing, and I believe I am as well, get off my lawn. Yeah, well, there's a boundary here. Just, you know, kind of leave me alone. And I have that belief. Then what if there's a brief period when we're learning about the world, where we can believe other things and stuff like that. But then eventually you do kind of get into a belief system. And if that's true, one, then you can pick the belief system that you want. You can go shopping for all these different gods or philosophies or political sciences or psychologies or big paranormal anomalies, all these different ways of viewing the world. And then you can kind of settle into it. And the one that I like to settle into is Zen. That's kind of my default belief system. And it's not that I believe it, but it's something that I enjoy doing. And then just leave the rest up to the people who are believing new things. Maybe there's a certain point where you can't believe any more new things. It's just kind of rehashed.
So you brought up Zen. I wanted to, I guess, ask about that being, is that just the state of being calm and letting things flow? And also, if that's the case, how do you go about, you know, getting set in a belief system that keeps you in a loop until, you know, your time's up?
How do I get into that belief system?
How do you avoid getting into that? Because I feel like being Zen is kind of attempting to eliminate a very permanent belief system, right? And it's kind of trying to remain in impermanence.
Right. That's a belief system, and I'm fine getting stuck in that belief system. Like I I think it's important for people to believe in things. At first, I was of the mind that belief is the death of intelligence, and I, as an intellectual person, I still think that way. Okay, that's just a belief, and I can put that in a box, right? But what are the details of it? How does it work? That sort of thing. Those questions can be asked about it, logical questions. But then there's a space outside of that which isn't logical at all, and it's just the experience. And so I tailor my beliefs around this experience that I like with Zen, which is kind of stoic and let things happen, like you said.
Yeah. What at the beginning you brought up metaprogramming, and we talked about it a little bit in the last episode. But what exactly is that, and how has it affected your situation? Because I feel as if like you've gone through that yourself when you dove into this topic, in the past 2 years.
Yeah. Following breaking my back, I spent a lot of time in the float tank and then alone inside my own head. One of the first things I did in the hospital was I put on my headphones, and because I was in so much pain, and that the way to escape it was just to go inside. And so I threw on Terrence McKenna, Alan Watts, and Ram Dass, and I listened to them for just like on pain pills at first, and then I started eating marijuana brownies, and then I just kind of got into that meditative space and just laid there, kind of in like a shavasana in a meditation for a few weeks, listening to their words and then being alone in my own head. And so I kind of took from that, I got the realization that if what you bring into you affects you, then you choose the things that you want to affect you and bring that in. So that's the kind of the programming angle. And then the meta-programming is when you cut out everything that you don't want to be brought in, and then you only include the things that you want to be brought in. So it's cult-like. You're creating a cult of one. But what else you can do? Okay, so some of the meta-programming techniques is neuro-linguistic programming, and I got into that for a little bit, where you take the words that you use and you tailor them and you repeat them in certain ways and methods using kind of their scheme to convince yourself of things. What I find really interesting is the things that you say, you believe, and if you say different things, you will believe different things. So choosing the words you use can be very helpful in programming the way you perceive reality. All right, so I've gone into church, like Catholic church, and I go there once a month or so. I'll go to Catholic church, and I'll go in and I'll try to believe, and I'll say the words that they use. I'll try to believe what they believe. And sometimes it sticks, sometimes it doesn't. Coming from a more atheist background, but language, and then some of the exercises you can do of kind of breaking apart what you believe you are. And so with psychedelics, it's easy because you get hit in the face with your a loss of identity. And so if you can lose your identity, then that means it's temporary. And if it's temporary, that means you can dismiss it and put on new clothes, right? That's kind of the schizophrenic angle of it, where you can choose different words to use in different settings, or if you want a different perception, you can choose different actions to take and thoughts to give things, and then values as well. You can place new values on things, where if you had an attachment to putting on makeup and nice clothes, or not nice clothes, but fashionable clothes, then you are kind of LARPing, live action role playing, and through your behaviors, you could have a certain feel, right? So when you put on a suit, you feel different than when you're putting on your jammies. And so it's really thinking about what kind of experience that you want to have and tailoring your beliefs, thoughts, and actions to create that experience, possibly create that experience.
Yeah. So, like, I guess, well, to help me understand neuro-linguistic metaprogramming here, to go back to using religion as an example, so to compare Judaism and Catholicism, for instance, like, Judaism is a meta program, right? And Catholicism would be another meta program. If you're using religion as that example, in Judaism, before after a religious service, everybody does two prayers. One is called Chamotzi, and the other is Bere Pri Hagafen, or whatever, Bere. And so the Chamotzi is a prayer of, like, I guess, gratitude, or like understanding of, like, the bread, or crops from the earth are part of what makes us be able to be alive, and that it's thanking God for that. And then everyone eats a piece of bread. And then the beret is a prayer over basically the same thing, but for the fruit of the vine, and that, like, grapes and wine are responsible for us being alive. Well, that's very similar to Catholicism with communion, right? Taking the communion wafer and a sip of wine, but they use the terminology of, like, this is Christ's blood and body and everything. And it's a very similar, they're doing the same thing. We're doing the exact same thing, but the terminology is different, which makes it, if you do Chamotzi and Beret, you're a Jew. If you do communion, you're Catholic, but it's just like changing kind of the neuro-linguistic meta-programming, correct?
I see these rituals as well in some of the other things we do. So, like, when I do a sweat lodge, we go through the same physical action and a belief structure. And then also when we let's take the religious and political, where we do these rituals of listening to the State of the Union, or going to an election, or going to a rally. And the physical action of doing that reinforces the belief that we have. So that's why it's important for people in cults to continue doing the same thing over and over again. It's to reinforce their belief in things. And so, like, when you get up in the morning and you look at your face in the mirror and you shave it, or you fix your hair, you're going through a ritual that reinforces your belief in what you're doing, right? And so, yeah, did that kind of take off where you left off?
Well, so no, I mean, yeah, it does. But I guess what I was talking about is that the terminology of those rituals creates the meta programming. Like, what I was saying, I guess, is that the ritual in Judaism is the same as the ritual in Catholicism. It's just it uses different terminology, different language, and then creates a whole different meta program. Like, you can eat bread and drink wine in a ritual manner, but if you call it Chamotzi and Beret Pri Hagafen, you're creating a meta program of Judaism for yourself. But if you call it communion, you're you're calling it Christ's blood and body, you're creating a meta program through just that language. With the same ritual, you're creating that meta program of Catholicism.
Yeah, and then the only way that information is passed to the priest who organizes the ritual is through language.
Yeah.
So it's all language based. So then reality, the religious reality, would be a language based reality.
Yeah.
But a deeper spiritual experience. So I really think that when people, I'm not Catholic, so I don't go up to the altar and take the bread of the host. But I do believe that people who are really religious have an experience. So we can't discredit that. And so if the type of experience they have is based on language, then we have more reinforcement of our belief that language creates an experience in religion.
Yeah. Well, and that idea is what, once you're aware of that, it's what frustrates me so much about, what is so much war in our reality caused by, but arguing, basically a disagreement in terminology between three religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, right? And they all teach the same things. They're all the same rituals and stuff like that. They just use different terminology and then end up fighting each other over it almost, And it's like most war is just caused by like an ignorance of your meta program almost, or following the meta program. Maybe, religion's supposed to cause war. I don't know. But, it just seems like I remember when, my brother got married, his wife is very Catholic, and he isn't very Jewish, but he does, go to a conservative Jewish temple. And I'm talking about his second marriage. His first marriage was definitely, his wife converted, and he raised his kids from that marriage Jewish. And so in his second marriage, to a very Catholic woman, it was in a Catholic church by a priest, but he tried to incorporate as much Jewish rituals and traditions of Jewish marriage into it as he could. And we were talking beforehand with the priest and going over some of the things. And it was like the first time that he had noticed the similarities between Judaism and Christianity. And he was like, guys, there's a lot of similarity here. And like, I remember thinking, I'm like, are you really that stuck in the priest program that you've never realized its roots in Judaism? Or like, you've never realized that? Like, because that was one thing that we were talking about, was like the Chamotzi and Beret Priyagofen and how it's like communion. And it's like, he had never made that connection. And it was mind boggling to me. Like, I would like to think that priests are obviously experts in Catholicism, but also very, knowledgeable on all other religions. But it's like, and some are, this guy obviously doesn't represent all priests, but it was just mind boggling to me that like he had never realized that, never noticed that. He was so stuck in Catholicism that, he never realized that like, it's just the words are different.
Yeah, everybody's in their own little reality tunnel. A priest will look only where he's allowed to look, and then will tell all of his congregation. Yeah, everybody's just in their own programs, and they're all pretty much the same. Especially looking at the way people believe things. And I have a background in propaganda as well, and the way people consume information, believe it, and then just retell it without even looking into it. Yeah. And you can't look into some of these things, God, simulation, stuff like that, but you can think critically about them and think critically about your thinking, meta thinking. And that's far and beyond a lot of religious programming.
Yeah.
That's what they call magic, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, and I think like the reality tunnel idea, even though we talked about there's other paths to being in the moment, I think that's one area that psychedelics has a pretty hard advantage to overcome. Is like, if you're trying to break out of your reality tunnel, psychedelics are going to do that a lot more efficiently than any other method, and I think like that's one thing that I appreciate about them, and why I think they're so important. And to quote Terrence McKenna of like how he says, to live and die without having a psychedelic experience is akin to living and dying without having a sexual experience. It's like, to use that priest, like, he's not going to have either of those. I mean, well, maybe he had sex before he was a priest, but still, like, it's like, God, he's going to be so stuck in that reality tunnel, like, it's kind of like, I don't know, you almost feel bad for people like that. But it, like, I get a lot of emails from people with like, that haven't done psychedelics yet, but are interested in it. And that's how they found my videos and podcasts and stuff like that. And, they struggle with that being in that reality tunnel so much. And, often my response is like, yeah, it really sounds like you do need to do mushrooms, or whatever you're looking into doing, because it's like, I can't explain it to you. You need to experience it, because it's your reality tunnel that you're in. And I can't really infer, like, what's going on, but I do know that having a psychedelic experience at least once will help you understand it more than, some jerk off like me sending you an email, because you responded to my YouTube video,
Then you're just going to believe somebody else, and that's not the point.
Yeah.
I think another great tool is traveling. I've had the fortunate experience to travel the world a little bit, and there's, talking with people who have not been outside of their country is, it's like talking another language. You kind of got to come down a little bit and have a little bit more understanding that they don't know what the rest of the world is like. They've not experienced other languages. They've not experienced other cultures. So all that they receive is the things that they've been told about, right? That this simulation, this matrix that's been created about these other things. But by traveling, you get to experience traveling as an explorer, as somebody just going somewhere and experiencing the culture and the climate and everything. By doing that, then that's another way to break out of the way you think, or learning another language. That's another good one. And I think by playing with different philosophies, you're learning a different language. There's a big difference between the Catholic, or the Judaism and the Kabbalah, and DMT and the simulation hypothesis. Right? There's different languages that different words we're using to describe things there. And so, if we can live different languages, and then people can break out of their reality tunnel a little bit.
Yeah, and I like how you said traveling as an explorer and not as a tourist too. It's like I thought about that. Like, I touched on it when I was talking about going to Mexico, and I've like you, I've been lucky and traveled many different cultures, and like, to use two of them, like, I've been to Mexico, but it's been, well, when I was a kid, I went to like Tijuana and stuff like that, which is a whole different experience. But my last trip, I was in a completely manufactured reality and culture of being locked into a resort, and like, so I left my country, but I was just in a hotel. I could have been in Florida. I don't know. It was just on a beach, and there was a lot of Mexican people there serving me drinks and food. But other than that, like, I didn't experience that culture. It didn't really expand my horizons at all. But then in contrast, I have very close friends that are essentially family that live in Northern Ireland, who I've gone and visited several times, and stayed, slept on their couch and hung out with their friends at a bar and like all this stuff, where it's like, that's no tourism at all. Like, that is fully experiencing their culture from a, like, I'm staying at my friend's house kind of experience. And so, it's hard to do that. It's hard to travel the world and have that experience without having that intention, going to Europe and backpacking and staying in hostels and stuff like that, as opposed to, signing up and just being in a tour group that's going around on a bus or something like that, and going to these scenarios that are set up, to make tips and whatever. That's really important. And I do agree that, like, nothing can alter your reality and understand the differences. We can get so stuck in, being like America first and following all that propaganda that, like,
good propaganda though.
It is. Like, one thing, for instance, if you follow American propaganda, you would think, like, we have the best healthcare system in the world, and it's great, and that's why it's so expensive, and insurance companies are good for healthcare and all this stuff. But then, for instance, like, when I go and talk with my friends from Northern Ireland that are part of a developed country that also has universal health care that's paid through their taxes or whatever, when they come and visit us, they're scared shitless, because they're like, if we get hurt or sick over there, we're screwed. We're bankrupt, like, it's not going to be good care. Like, here we can't get the same, there's stuff that's like prescription medicine here that's just over the counter there because it's no big deal. And so if they need it, they can't get it without going to a doctor and, paying insane amounts out of pocket to get medicine that they're used to just going to the store and picking up. And without understanding that, like, you could totally buy into our propaganda that, like, yeah, we're, our medicine's the best. American medicine's the best, where it's like, without seeing other people's perspective, you wouldn't know that it's different, like, and I think that's really important to, even if you can't travel and be an explorer, to make good friendships, even if they're only online, with people that are from other cultures and have a different perspective and can shine a light on like what your beliefs are about your culture. I think that's important too, and that's a beauty of the tool we have in internet communities now, like our Discord or even Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that, I guess too, to some extent. That connection without actually going there can help you, get a clear picture of reality as well. Well, so that's pretty heavy talk.
It gets deep in the weeds.
Yeah, and I know, like, we talked about having other episodes and digging in deeper in each chapter or whatever, but let's just talk a little bit about the process of writing. Like, let's like get out of the simulation and just talk about the simulation. How has writing, what are like challenges you've come across, and what is the some habits that you've developed to help you write?
Well, I write every morning. One thing that Stan knows is that I have a daily number, and today I'm on day 13,499. And so I start my day with that, and then I just write down. I do my thankful. I'm grateful for this, whatever, and then I start writing. And that writing process looks like reading and then taking notes. And for 2 years, I just read and took notes. I had no idea what I was going to do with this thing. I started out from James Carson's books, Finite and Infinite Games, thinking I could do like a self-help book. And then it kind of grew into this simulation theory thing, because I just kept getting sucked into rabbit holes of quantum physics and language and propaganda and programming. And so I took down 2 years worth of reading and writing notes. And then I started to separate them. I put them into 10 categories, one for each chapter. And so it's blocked off like that. And then I threw the tour guide of the simulation process on top of that. And so for that was the research part. For the other part of writing the book, I've done one manuscript so far and my book proposal. So I still have about a year or a little bit longer to go in completing the entire project. But when I'm writing, I'll put if I want 75,000 words, which is what I wanted for my first one, I said, okay, that's 150 days at 500 words a day. And 500 words really isn't much, but I have a family, I have a job, I have 1,000 other things. So I budget off. I get up at 4:30, I'll meditate, coffee, and then I'll just bang out 500 words. And if I could do that over 150 days, then I have 75,000 words. And then I took that and I played with it and I reconstructed it. And then I'm going to rewrite it. And so my next writing process, now that I'm a little bit better at writing, it'll probably be 1,000 words in the morning and have it done within just a few weeks,
Yeah, I think I think that helps, because it's like, when you break everything down into the numbers like that, it makes it less daunting, like it's breaking it up into manageable pieces. I think one thing that I've picked up from you, and man, it's been the hardest thing for me to start back up, because I quit for a while. It is, like you said, like starting journaling in the morning and starting with the day, the number that you've been alive, and I was doing that, and then, you know, um I was starting with gratitude, but then I wasn't trying to write with the intention of writing a book, but I was, after being grateful, I would write, goals, daily, weekly goals, and update myself as to if I completed them, if I pushed it off a week, if I pushed it off a day, just to keep myself accountable and to like kind of, have, when you write down your goals, like they become real. They're not just a daydream kind of thing. Um, and then I was also keeping track of if I microdosed, if I took kratom. Like I was definitely trying to keep myself accountable for, like, if I was falling into like a taking kratom every day for like 2 weeks or whatever, like writing it down to be like, oh, it's been 4 days in a row, I should give it a break, stuff like that. If I was taking modafinil or any sort of substance that I wanted to limit, forming a habit, I was writing down when I took it, why I took it, what dose I took, and stuff like that. And I thought that was really helpful. And I stopped, and it's been the hardest thing to get back into, just basically because I'm not giving myself enough time in the morning, which is something we've talked about in the Discord of like getting up earlier. I think is like always a good idea, no matter what you're trying to do. Um, but yeah, just seeing the development of how you've went from talking about writing a book. I think before you were even on the podcast the first time, when you and I just talked for a couple hours on the phone, um, I think you had just had the inkling to write a book. You're like, I'm going to write a book, but you hadn't really started yet, And so to see the development to where now you have, a proposal that you emailed to us, like it's awesome. And I, really inspirational to me. Um, I've, I've kind of gotten to a point, or I've told people like, yeah, I want to write a book, but I never got in the mindset of like, I'm going to, and figured out how to put it out, because I've never broken it down and done like, what are the steps I can do to it. It's like I look at like I'd like to write a book, and then I'm like, oh my god, it's going to take forever to write it. And I've never looked at the in between, and I think like that's something I personally need to do. uh because I think like my idea for a book is to write, a book about psychedelic parenting. And it's like I have that good idea, but then it's like I just get scared off by like how much work it would be, and then just never get past that idea. So I think your method there of like, what can you do every day to work towards that end goal instead of being afraid of that end goal is a very key thing. And not even for writing, I mean for anything someone's trying to, you know accomplish, that is a big thing that would take a bunch of different steps. Like that's a good way to do it, is just like start with what you can do every day, every morning.
Yeah, especially if we're both busy people, and so I can't really tell you that this will be done at a certain time. So I don't set myself any goals. My goal is to get a little bit done each day, and even if it's just reading a few pages out of a book I'm interested in, taking a few notes. I found so much good that comes from copying quotes out of books, and then I have them, right? And then later I can, especially like if you're working with parenting and you get into a Montessori book and you start reading about how children learn, and just start taking notes and just accumulate them over. I think I went through like 6 or 7 notebooks, just dollar store notebooks of me taking notes. Then I had to go back through, read every page, and then from those notebooks put them into a computer program, and then sort them that way. So it's a very long and difficult process the way I did it. But by not having a set timeline, I can do whatever I want. I mean, I'm pretty comfortable in my life, so I'll do the best I can, and if it works out, it works out, and if it doesn't, well, that's cool too. I did something. I like to think of it as what do you bring into the party? I think life's a big party. What are you bringing? Well, Ruben's bringing a space for discussion. I can bring a book. What else? What else can we bring? Stan's got the music.
Yeah.
What can we do? We're all here. If you have the opportunity to create, then I can run with it. It doesn't. Especially the beginning part when you're writing or with creating anything, you feel like an idiot. Like, I do not know what I'm doing. But then I have to convince myself, okay, I may not know what I'm doing, but I'll figure it out somehow. You don't even know how you're going to figure it out, but you just know that it's like that manifestation that Stan wanted to talk about, of, you put yourself in that final position of what your goal is. All right, now I have a destination, or maybe I have a path that I want to be on in the Zen way. Okay, how do I get there? And it's not done. You don't climb a mountain by going via helicopter. You climb a mountain, but one step at a time. And
yeah,
I like that, and I like being in the mountains, or in this case, being in the simulation. So I'll just play with that until I'm done with it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's another reason, like you said, about not setting a timeline. Is like, all you're really doing, if you set a timeline for any sort of creativity, whether it's writing or music or anything. I mean, writing's an art, so like any kind of art or creativity, if there's something you're trying to create or accomplish, and you're going to set a timeline, unless you're really good at planning out and accomplishing those plans, you're almost setting yourself up for like disappointment, and you're also tainting the art there. It's like art needs it needs discipline, but it more importantly needs inspiration, which you can't. I mean, you can manifest some stuff, but you can't really force inspiration a lot of times. And if you're writing a book and you're like, I have to finish it by then, but you don't get that inspiration before then like it's not going to be what it's supposed to be. It's like it has to be a little more organic. I think the other thing you posted, or you said that's important, is you read a ton of other books, and that's important in any sort of creativity or art as well, is to, like, you need to breathe in to breathe out. And that's one thing I've noticed with myself, like, a period of my life where I was a really creative musician and creating a lot of songs and riffs or whatever for bands I was in. I was listening to a ton of music at the time, and getting inspiration from that. Fast forward to now, where my main source, or my main avenue of creation is these podcasts, right? Well, I listen to a ton of podcasts. I'm fortunate enough that my job allows me to basically just do nothing but listen to podcasts all day. But that has helped me become a better podcaster, and craft my skills there more. Just the art of doing it, or the act of doing it, like, since Stan and I have, like, kind of made a commitment to do it weekly, I think that's helped our skills as well. But I get so much inspiration from listening to a wide range of topics of podcasts that helps me kind of develop the ideas of what I want certain episodes to be about, or questions I want to ask, or whatever. That's important too. Like, I imagine, if you had just been focusing on writing but not reading, like, you would get a lot more writer's block, I imagine. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, these ideas didn't come from me. I think out of this entire book of 100 ideas or so, I think I thought that I came up with 2, but then I found somebody else with something like that. So it's not original. The daily number, I thought, I was like, man, that's so cool. I came up with a daily number. And then I found 2 other people, and then Steve Jobs used it as well. So I don't even know where these ideas come from. So yeah, a lot of it's waiting around, and by reading, you're stimulating and providing a space for new ideas to come in. And if I'm reading, that means I'm getting the neurons are firing, and I can work with that information in and information out. What I've done is taken a bunch of information from all across the liberal arts and thrown them together in a creative way. I think I was reading Dali's work, about how Dali worked, the painter, and it was kind of the same thing. There's nothing new, but there's new ways to put old things together.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can see examples of that all over. I mean, look at music, right? You know, it's like there's very little music that's like this completely unique thing that's never been done before. It's like everything's blending, you know, blues and uh, uh, jazz and country or whatever. You know, it's all like that's how you make new music, is by blending stuff that's already been done, and um, you know, writing and visual art as well is the same thing. Like that's you know, that's part of the creative process, is taking what inspired you up to that point and blending it together with your influence on it. And that's what we've been doing since the first cave painting, you know, honestly. Like that's what art has been.
I wanted to ask, like, since we're talking about visual art a little bit, what your inspiration was for creating as many infographics as you plan on creating for your book, because I know that's seems to be at least a large part of putting forward your ideas.
Well, I know that, well, my basis for this is I need lumberland and solar panels to start my next project. So I need to trade this. So this can't be just a book that's fun for a few. It needs to be something that's approachable and sellable, as weird and as deep as this is. So looking around the internet, infographics are great ways to communicate you can communicate a lot of information. And I saw that and I thought, if I could put infographics inside of a book, that'd make it a little bit more palatable and understandable. And when, like, I'm envisioning when somebody picks up the book, I want them to go, "Oh, wow, that's pretty cool. Oh, that makes sense," in the first 10 seconds. And that it can't be done with words, especially with the attention span of most people. But it can be done with infographics. So then I started thinking about some of the books that I've used in the past. And there's a book called America the Book by Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert and a few of them. And they use a lot of pictures and graphics to describe what they're talking about, the political system of America. And I thought, man, so I used that as inspiration. Then my buddy had a kind of a Dungeons and Dragons game. I forget what it's called. But there's a Dungeons and Dragons game, and he let me look at the book, and it was just, it's the same thing. It's a world, right? Just like this simulation idea is a world that I've created. D&D is a world as well, and the books that they use are very visual books. So I got a lot of ideas coming from that, where the asides and the exercises and the questions that I have for the reader are stand out visually, as opposed to just being words.
Yeah, I think that's entirely important for the complexity of what you're trying to put out there.
Oh yeah, I'm no stranger to being confused about things. So I'm sure other people are. Oh, but that doesn't make any sense logically. Yeah, I don't fucking know, but it's if it stimulates the person to be curious, that's what I'm looking for. That even if it doesn't make sense, that just a cool way to do it. Is it fun?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, at the very least, I think any sort of art that inspires people to just get off the train and walk around, if we want to look at simulation as just this train that's rolling along, and you can either get caught up in it or stop and look around. Like, I think that's what your book will, kind of bring to the party. Like you said, it will inspire some people to just stop and think about, like, what's really going on and how much control we have over it, if any, and the without getting off the train, like, you're just going down the path of, like, following along and just, going where everything's taking you. And, I think that's one thing your book will help people realize that's not the case if you don't want it to be.
Yeah, it's for the psychedelic community, and I think one thing that comes with using psychedelics is an existential crisis over time, right? Even if it's just your own identity, like, who am I, sort of thing, and there's no real grounding point. That's where you have people that are trained with integration, taking the psychedelic experience that somebody has and then integrating it into their lives. And so this because of that, and because of the fake news and quantum physics, we have that dissolving of reality, or what we believe is real. And it can provide a decent grounding, especially at the end, after I tell them that they're living in a simulation. That at the end, okay, so you're living in this weird reality. Even if we take the simulation aside, and people realize that they're in quite an extraordinary and weird reality where things aren't what they seem. That's very disorienting, and how to deal with it. Because I think Eric Davis, who wrote High Weirdness, he had the idea that there's going to be a bunch of cults to come that find meaning where we have lost it, right? So what is real, what is not? And so there's going to be grounding points. Religion is a grounding point for some people, right? It doesn't matter what happens, Jesus has me, right? And that's a grounding point. It works. So in coming up, you're going to be seeing a lot more, especially with decentralized information. You're going to see a lot of, and decentralized authority. You're going to see a lot more cults come up. And you can either get hooked into a cult if you like, or you're going to get hooked into a cult without thinking about it. And if you're aware, then you can kind of choose the things that you want. But if you're unaware, then you're just going to go into whatever comes next.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an important thing that will get people to start questioning stuff, is, like you said, the decentralized. It can be more confusing, and I think that's why like, I think you're right that cults will arise from the changing of schools of thought in human society. But we're already seeing that, that's like with media being decentralized, you don't know what to believe. So, like, I think that's what will lay the groundwork for cultish behavior, which we're already seeing with politics, like we were talking about. But yeah, I to go back to something we were talking about earlier, with like the benefit of that decentralized thought is we can very much so create our own reality just through that media. Like, a lot of people get upset that, like, Google news feed will only show you what you're interested in, or YouTube only shows you what you're interested in. But we can use that to our advantage to help, shape our reality to some extent. Like, yeah, we can always, like, stop and be like, oh, I'm biased in what I believe, but, like, who cares? It's your ride, And I think that's a big benefit of decentralized media and schools of thought. The other thing we talk about a lot is decentralized economies. Bitcoin doesn't need to beat anything to be useful, to people. Just the fact that it's decentralized, whether it's Bitcoin or other cryptos, it gives people just another avenue, whether or not it wins, whether or not the media believes in it, or whatever, people might be down on decentralized economies about. Like, they exist. They're going to always exist now. And it's just another option in our ride, much like, decentralized media or decentralized spirituality or thought, whatever. It's just another option. And I think that's so important about the decentralization of society right now.
Yeah, and it will become more complex. I mean, the fact that we don't I don't know how a quantum computer works, but if that's the technology of 20 years from now, then the way people will be thinking will be based on the technology that they use. So they're going to have to become more complex. And I don't think this generation, these generations will, but the following ones will. And they'll be thinking, just like my son will be thinking about things much differently than I am because of the technology he's using.
Yeah.
You know, and so if we have these decentralized computers and networks and different ways of thinking about things, decentralized power and currencies, then we'll have other ways of thinking that we cannot even think about yet. And it's going to be, it's like you have your knowns and your known unknowns, and then your unknown unknowns. And there are things outside the things we can think that our generations that follow us will think.
Yeah.
And the methods too. And so that's why I really like thinking. It's you can create and then taking the thought and doing something with it is other people can take it and run with it. Right. So this isn't the end of thinking. So decentralization is, I think, just another step. And then there'll be something after decentralization we probably don't know because, 80 years ago, we didn't know that there was going to be a way to communicate between three people over this magic machine with cords and some without cords,
Yeah.
So there are futures that we can't even think we can think about. Or as Terrence McKenna said, the world isn't stranger than you can perceive. It's stranger than you can perceive. And the same thing goes with our technologies in the future as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and it only seems more complicated. The end game of technology, or a point in the distance of technology, seems so mind-boggling and complex from looking at the starting point. But if you take into account like the path that will get going there, it's not as complicated. It's just like anything else. Like you said, like a touchscreen iPad or phone doesn't seem complicated now, but before they came out, it seemed super complicated, and wherever that is going, like, seems complicated, but the path on the way to it won't, it's like, it's just what happens. It's just kind of evolution of information and energy and everything, just along with how life evolves,
Right. So even if you take the current technologies that we have, let's take psychedelics, Elon Musk's Neuralink, and metaprogramming. And if you let's say we can create in the future realities within our minds that we believe are real, and kind of the inception, those people that are hooked up to ketamine or something like that, and they're living in their own simulation, their own headspace. If that's within one of our many futures that's available, then there are futures that we can't even imagine using the way we're thinking. So it's an open book, but I think because it's an open book, there are no predestined futures. Then those who know about this can create their own. That's what you're seeing Elon Musk do. He's going, we can get there. We don't know how, but we're going in this direction, and we'll find a way. And maybe we'll stumble upon something else in the interim.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like I said, this is a pretty deep talk and everything, man. My head's kind of swimming, so we should probably wrap it up. But I'd love to have you back on as you develop more, about your chapters of your book and stuff like that, and just keep letting you come on and having these talks and stuff, man, because it's like I said, your way of looking at things and the depth of your conversations on our Discord and when you've been on the podcast and when we've talked is awesome. And I really appreciate, you being a part of the community, and I appreciate you coming on the podcast, man.
Yeah, appreciate you all. And keep working on that idea of the psychedelic parenting. It's something that I was thinking about as well. There's no book out there. So, hop on it. There's a market.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's that. It's, again, it's I want to keep it deep, but I also want it to be like a humorous book, to be approachable to people, to because that's like kind of a taboo topic or whatever. So that's kind of the thing I struggle with. But like I was saying, I think your approach to it is very doable to just work towards. And, I hope to get inspiration from you to do that. So, yeah, man, I know you got a float to get to, so we'll wrap it up and talk to you again soon.
Right on. Thank you, guys. Love you.
As always, thank you for listening to the Help Find the Others podcast. Please don't forget to check out our Discord server to connect with our growing community. The link to join can be found in the description. And if you feel like donating to our channel to help us grow, a link to our Patreon can also be found in the description, as well as some cryptocurrency wallet addresses. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast or have any questions about these topics, please email helpfindtheothers@protonmail.com. If you would like to leave a voicemail or a text message question for a future episode, Stan, what's that number again?
567-233-1335.
Okay, guys, thanks again. And until next time, let's help find the others.